Hello, and welcome everyone to the fourth annual International IP Summit. I am David Olson. I'm an associate professor at Boston College Law School, where I also serve as the faculty director of the program on innovation and entrepreneurship, which is co-hosting this summit. It's good to have you all here. To start off, it is my pleasure to introduce Diane M. Ring, who is interim dean at Boston College Law School. She served as Associate Dean of Faculty from 2018 to 2021. She is Professor of Law and the Dr. Thomas F. Carney Distinguished Scholar at BC Law. She researches primarily in international taxation, corporate taxation, and ethical issues in tax practice. Her recent work addresses issues including information exchange, tax leaks, international tax relations, sharing economy, and human equity transactions, as well as ethics in international tax law, rather. Professor Ring was a consultant for the United Nations 2014 project on tax-based protection for developing countries and the UN's 2013 project on treaty administration for developing countries. She was the US national reporter for the 2012 IFA conference on the debt equity conundrum and the US national reporter for the 2004 IFA conference on double non-taxation. She served as chair or vice chair for the tax section committee of teaching taxation of the American Bar Association from 2013 to 2020. Professor Ring is co-author of 3 casebooks covering corporate, international, and ethical issues in tax, respectively. She clerked for Judge John O. Newman of the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. And on a personal note, Diane has been a great friend and mentor to me ever since I joined BC Law in 2007. And so, Dean Ring, it's my pleasure to welcome you and thank you for opening the conference.
Absolutely, David. Well, first, I'd like to thank you all for coming today. It's really my privilege as well to welcome you to the 4th Annual International IP Summit. And while, of course, we had hoped the summit would be in person this year, I'm confident that you will find the online discussions thought-provoking and informative. We launched the program on innovation entrepreneurship, or PI, here at Boston College Law School in 2017. And our goal was to bring together scholars, lawyers, business persons, government officials, judges, innovators, and entrepreneurs to consider important issues in innovation and entrepreneurship. And we also wanted to think about these issues in a global context. This annual summit has become a significant way in which we accomplish those goals. And I'd like to thank Robson Gray for the fruitful partnership we've developed as co-sponsors of this event each year. Now, BC launched PI not simply because there's a large and growing need for legal services around innovation and entrepreneurship. We launched PI because innovation, entrepreneurship, small businesses, and startups are crucial contributors to both economic growth and social mobility. In addition to PI, as part of our social justice mission, BC Law provides free legal services through our Entrepreneurship and Innovation Clinic, which is led by Professor Sandy Tarrant. And it focuses on helping entrepreneurs who lack those resources typical of many startup founders. There have been very few times in history where I think the importance of innovation has been more evident. And while we are not able to host the summit in person due to the pandemic, we are in a far different position than we were 1 year ago when the pandemic was surging and the public responses were primarily limited to masking and social distancing, right? Now, here at Boston College, we are back to teaching our classes in person. Students gather in the library and the cafeteria to work together on group projects or moot courts. Faculty are meeting again in person. They exchange ideas, have workshops. And across the country, many more K-12 students are learning in person, again, as they seek to make up really for the losses of a year of online-only learning. And while we have endured another recent COVID surge, the cases have been falling in most places for the past 4 weeks. And, many of the risks, or at least for many of us, the risks of serious illness or death has greatly reduced. And so what's caused this dramatic change in circumstances, right? We are all very well aware it's the COVID vaccine. And what made it possible to have that vaccine in record time? Again, we know the answer, right? It's an ecosystem of innovation that was able to really quite nimbly respond and produce innovative vaccines with amazing effectiveness. Government helped, to be absolutely certain, but without a worldwide system of research, development, innovation of the type that now exists, without the mechanisms for drug developers to recoup the costs of sort of massive R&D investments that were directed to COVID, right? These vaccines would not have been possible, or certainly not as possible in the time frame we've seen them delivered. But it's not just in times of pandemic that innovation and creative production make our lives better. Right? In nearly every area of life, we benefit from successful innovation and creativity that makes us healthier, safer, more productive, more comfortable, better educated, even more entertained. Right? And again, without innovation systems, companies that have, sort of companies, the people in place producing these vaccines, we would have had to face a dire choice between lockdown, right, or going back to work and school at the cost of millions of lives. But while we can tell this story of increasing success in the US, where virtually anyone can get a vaccine if they would like, this is not the case throughout the world. Just over 1/3 of the global population is fully vaccinated, according to data compiled by the University of Oxford. In some poorer countries, the percentage of population vaccinated is in the single digits. Innovation that brings great improvements in life in the developed world can be slow in coming to the developing world, if it comes at all. And the same IP protections that incentivize research and development can also be used effectively to keep prices high and restrict distribution to the detriment of the neediest. IP law has always had to strike a balance between encouraging innovation and facilitating equitable distribution. I am very pleased to see that the summit's going to be tackling this tension directly, including in today's first panel on IP rights, vaccines, and drug development. It is important to bring together experts to discuss how to facilitate the distribution of critical inventions, especially to poorer countries without their own manufacturing capabilities, but while also at the same time ensuring that we maintain sufficient incentives to produce these inventions and keep infrastructure in place. I mentioned earlier that we live in a system of worldwide innovation and distribution. Businesses, policymakers, lawyers, and academics must think about their work in a global context. The second panel today on IP updates from around the world will encourage us to think about how IP regimes are evolving worldwide and how to navigate and harmonize them. Along with the benefits of technological advance come new risks and challenges. While new technologies can produce these amazing benefits, they can also facilitate fraud, invasion of privacy, criminality, dehumanization, and civil strife. I look with interest at the topics the summit will address tomorrow, including the quickly evolving landscape of privacy and cybersecurity regulation, as well as potential anti-competitive uses of IP and online platforms. Tomorrow's panel of general counsel should be especially interesting as we hear how top lawyers in these companies think about these issues in real time. I'd like to thank our speakers for generously giving of their time and expertise. The summit is made possible by a partnership between BC Law's program on innovation and entrepreneurship and, as I mentioned, Ropes and Gray. And I would like to thank some key people in both institutions for their work on this summit. The planning committee for the conference consisted of Ed Kelly, Regina Sampenti from Ropes and Gray, Bebe Sun from Sanofi, and BC Law's faculty director of PI, Professor David Olson. I know that this has been a considerable investment of your valuable and in some cases billable time. I'd also like to thank Alicia Steves as well as the Ropes and Gray events team. I offer particular thanks to Laura Entwistle from Ropes, who tirelessly shepherded the summit from incubation to its final form today. Here at BC Law, I'd like to give special thanks to Nate Kenyon and Vicki Sanders for their work on logistics, materials, promotion, and coverage of the summit. In conclusion, I warmly welcome you and wish you a most productive summit. So back to you, David.
Thank you so much, Dean Ring. And really, thank you for those comments, which I think really set us up to delve into these really interesting issues. So as I said before, it's my pleasure to co-host this summit for the fourth time. As Dean Ring said, when we started PI 5 years ago, one of our big goals was to increase cross-disciplinary engagement around innovation and entrepreneurship, and to do it from a global and local perspective as well. And so it was my great good fortune that Regina Sampinti and Ed Kelly of Ropes and Gray were thinking along the same lines at the same time, and we somehow came together and started doing this summit. I always learn a great deal from this summit, mainly because of the amazing speakers from Boston and around the world who share their expertise and engage in substantive and insightful discussions. And speaking of that, I don't want to stand between us and our speakers. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to my co-hosts, Regina and Ed, so they can also welcome you. And after that, we can begin. So Regina, over to you.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Dean Ring, for those comments. And thank you to BC Law for the wonderful partnership in co-hosting this summit for the last 4 years. For me personally, it has been an incredible ride just watching this event grow year after year. As David mentioned, I'm Regina Penty. I'm a partner in the IP transactions practice at Ropes and Gray. I represent technology, healthcare, and software companies. Our global practice here at Ropes and Gray spans our US as well as our international offices in London, Shanghai, Tokyo, and Seoul. And my practice is based in Boston and the London offices, and it covers a full range of IP services for technology-driven companies, from strategic counseling to licensing, acquisitions, and investments. So 4 years ago, we partnered with BC Law and PI to start this summit. And PI was just really beginning its important work of creating a forum for serious-minded professionals across life sciences and tech industries to come together and take up the challenging legal issues that were faced by them at the time. And Ropes IP practice saw, PI's efforts, and of course, we were very interested, and together we came up with the idea of a summit that really takes a very broad view of IP challenges facing companies doing business on the global stage. This year, these efforts to support innovative companies seem much more, ever more important. We're facing multiple crises that have threatened life as we know it and seem poised to exacerbate health, economic, and social disparities. As the Dean mentioned, it will take innovative thinking, investment in research, and commitments to exchange and share ideas around that research to blunt and overcome these threats. And so this year, we're excited that the summit has generated so much interest. Laura will put up a slide just to give you a sense of some of the companies that are represented here today, but we have over 30 speakers and over 300 companies are represented in over 300 of you have responded and accepted our invitation to join the summit this year. You're coming to us from over 170 companies, over 170 organizations, including about over 100 companies, 30 universities, and about 30 research institutes and law firms. And so with that, I will pass it over to my co-chair, Ed Kelly, to kick us off with our first panel of the day.